Hi guys, and welcome to Relaxation Bedtime History. Tonight we step quietly onto the edge of a place that hums with low music, warm air, and a kind of restless anticipation you can almost feel beneath your skin. You find yourself standing at the corner of a broad street where the last of the daylight fades into a soft amber glow, cast by gas lamps flickering to life. Carriages roll past at an unhurried pace, their wheels clicking against the uneven road. And somewhere nearby a piano is already awake, sending out playful notes that drift through the evening like an invitation you did not quite mean to accept. You hesitate for a moment, because even if you have never been here before, something in you understands that this is not an ordinary neighbourhood. This is Storyville, a place where the rules of the wider city loosen just enough to allow a different kind of life to unfold. A place that feels both open and strangely hidden at the same time. And if you are being honest, you probably will not survive this untouched. Not in the dramatic sense, but in the quieter way places like this tend to stay with you long after you have gone. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like sharing, go ahead and tell me where you are in the world right now, and what time it is as you listen. It is always a little comforting to know who else is drifting through these stories together. Now dim the lights and you begin to walk. The air is thick, not unpleasant, but full. It carries the scent of tobacco smoke, damp wood perfume that lingers too sweetly, and something faintly metallic from the river not far away. New Orleans has always been a city shaped by water trade and people arriving from everywhere. And as you take a few slow steps forward, you start to notice how all of that seems to gather here. In this one district, like threads pulled tight into a single knot. A widely recognised detail about this place is that Storyville was officially established in 1897, when city leaders decided to confine certain activities to a single regulated neighbourhood. The idea was simple on paper. If you cannot eliminate something, you contain it. Keep it visible, keep it controlled, and perhaps the rest of the city can pretend it does not exist. Of course, as you glance around now, it becomes clear that the reality is far less tidy than the plan. You pass beneath one of the lamps, its light casting a soft circle that briefly surrounds you before you step out of it again. Ahead, Basin Street stretches in a line that feels both welcoming and watchful. There are people everywhere, though no one seems to be in a hurry. A man in a well-pressed suit leans casually against a doorway, speaking in a low voice to someone just out of sight. A pair of sailors walk past you, their laughter too loud, a little unsteady, carrying the kind of energy that suggests they have been here before. You keep your pace slow, not because you are tired, but because everything invites you to notice it. The buildings themselves seem to lean slightly inward as if listening. Balconies hang overhead, draped with fabric and shadow, and behind some of the windows you catch glimpses of movement. A silhouette passing by, a curtain shifting, a flash of light that disappears as quickly as it came. Somewhere to your left, a door opens and a burst of music spills out. It is lively layered, not quite structured in the way you expect. The piano leads, but something else answers it, perhaps a cornet, perhaps just a voice humming along. This district, though known for many things, quietly nurtured the early sounds of what would later be called jazz. Musicians gathered here night after night, experimenting, blending rhythms and influences from African, Caribbean and European traditions into something entirely new. You pause for a second listening. It is tempting to step closer to follow the music inside, but you stay where you are, letting it wash over you instead. There is a strange comfort in remaining just outside, observing without fully entering, at least for now. As you continue walking, you notice how the street shifts in subtle ways. Some buildings are larger, their entrances marked by polished wood, brass fixtures and carefully maintained steps. Others are smaller, quieter, almost overlooked unless you are paying attention. The difference is not accidental. It reflects a layered system that shapes everything here, from who enters which door to how long they stay. A lesser known but curious detail is that the district even produced its own guidebooks, often referred to as blue books. These small publications listed names, addresses, and descriptions in a tone that tried to present the area with a kind of polite respectability. as if by organising it neatly on paper it could be understood, perhaps even justified. You can almost imagine someone holding one now, flipping through its pages under the same lamplight you stand in. Of course not everyone saw it that way. There has always been disagreement about whether Storyville reduced harm or simply concentrated it in one place where it became easier to ignore. Some scholars suggest that regulation provided a degree of protection and oversight, while others argue that it created an illusion of safety that masked deeper problems. Even now, long after the district itself has vanished, the debate continues quietly among historians who try to piece together what life here truly meant for the people who lived it. You take another step. The ground beneath your feet feels slightly uneven, worn down by years of movement. There is a rhythm to it, a soft echo of all the footsteps that have come before yours. For a moment you become aware of your own presence in a new way, not as an observer from a distance, but as part of the scene itself. The night deepens. The sky above shifts into a darker shade, though it never feels completely black. The glow of the lamps, the light from windows, and the constant flicker of activity keep the darkness at bay. You begin to hear more voices now, overlapping, blending into a steady murmur that fills the space between buildings. A woman passes by you, her dress brushing lightly against your sleeve. The fabric is soft, carefully chosen, and she moves with a kind of practiced ease. There is a hint of fragrance as she goes something floral but not overwhelming. She does not look at you directly, but there is an awareness there, a sense that everyone here is always noticing even when they pretend not to. You wonder briefly what her story is, but the thought drifts away before it can settle, because there is something else pulling your attention forward, a subtle shift in the atmosphere, almost like a quiet invitation. The deeper you move into the district, the more it begins to feel like a world with its own rules, its own pace, its own quiet logic that you are only just beginning to understand. And as you take another slow step beneath the warm glow of the lamps, you realize that this is only the beginning, the edge of something much larger, more complicated, and more human than the name Storyville alone could ever fully capture. You move a little farther along Basin Street, and the rhythm of the place begins to settle around you in a way that feels almost deliberate. What first seemed like a scattered mix of sounds and movement now starts to reveal a quieter pattern. Doors open and close with purpose. Conversations rise and fall in tones that feel practiced. Even the music drifting from one building to the next carries a sense of structure beneath its looseness. It is not chaos, it is arrangement, and that realization lingers with you as you pass another pool of lamplight and step into a slightly dimmer stretch of the street. Because places like this do not appear by accident. They are shaped, guided, and sometimes carefully hidden behind decisions made far from the people who live inside them. A commonly accepted historical point is that Storyville did not simply grow out of chance or habit. It was formally created by a city ordinance in 1897, often associated with Alderman Sidney Story, whose name the district would eventually take. The intention, at least on the surface, was to confine activities considered immoral into a defined area. By doing so, city officials hoped they could regulate behavior, reduce public complaints, and maintain a certain image for the rest of New Orleans. You slow your pace, letting that sink in, because there is something quietly unsettling about the idea of drawing a boundary around human behavior, as if it can be contained like water behind a wall. As if what happens inside those lines somehow becomes separate from everything outside them. You glance back briefly towards where you came from, and the rest of the city already feels more distant than it should. Ahead, the street bends slightly, and with it the atmosphere shifts again. You begin to notice small details that speak to this sense of control. Signs placed with intention. Entrances that seem to guide you without forcing you. The subtle presence of order beneath the surface of indulgence. It reminds you that Storyville was not hidden away in secrecy. It was mapped, documented, and in a way endorsed. Visitors could find it easily. Locals knew exactly where it began and ended. And yet for all that openness, there remains a feeling that you are stepping into something that prefers not to be examined too closely. A curious detail that often surprises people is how openly the district was promoted. Those blue books you heard about were not whispered secrets. They were printed guides listing establishments, describing their atmosphere, and even categorizing them by price and style. It gave the entire area a strange sense of legitimacy, almost like a directory of respectable businesses. Despite the nature of what took place inside, you imagine someone new to the city holding one of those books, standing where you are now deciding where to go next. It feels both ordinary and deeply unusual at the same time. As you continue forward, you begin to notice the presence of authority, though it is not always obvious. A uniformed figure stands at a corner, speaking quietly with a passerby. There is no urgency in the interaction, no raised voices, just a calm exchange that suggests familiarity rather than enforcement. This too is part of the design. Storyville was meant to be regulated. Inspections, rules, and oversight existed, at least in theory, to maintain a certain level of order. But as you watch the officers step back and allow the flow of the street to continue uninterrupted, you begin to sense the limits of that control. Because regulation does not always mean protection, and order does not always mean fairness. There is a tension here, subtle but constant. A balance between what is allowed and what is overlooked. Between what is visible and what is quietly ignored. You feel it in the way people glance at one another, in the way conversations pause just slightly when someone passes by. Some historians continue to debate whether this system actually reduced harm, or simply concentrated it in one place where it became easier to manage. One perspective suggests that by bringing everything into the open, it allowed for a level of monitoring that would not exist otherwise. Another view holds that it created a false sense of safety, one that masked deeper inequalities and vulnerabilities within the district. As you walk, you begin to understand why that question remains unresolved, because the answer is not something you can see all at once. It is hidden in small moments, in the way a door closes just a little too quickly, in the way a conversation shifts when a stranger approaches, in the quiet spaces between the music where something unspoken lingers. The street grows slightly busier as the evening deepens. A carriage slows near the curb, its driver glancing toward a brightly lit entrance. Two men step down, adjusting their coats, their expressions a mix of curiosity and confidence. They move towards the door with the ease of people who believe they understand where they are. You wonder how many feel that way when they arrive, and how many leave with a different understanding. You pass by a building with tall windows, their curtains drawn just enough to hint at the light inside. Shadows move across the fabric, slow and deliberate, creating a kind of silent performance for anyone watching from the street. It is not meant to reveal too much, just enough to invite the imagination to fill in the rest. This careful balance between exposure and concealment seems to define everything here. Even the sounds follow that pattern. Laughter rises, then fades. Music swells, then softens. Voices overlap, then separate again. Nothing stays constant for long, yet the overall rhythm continues without interruption. You take a deeper breath and the air feels warmer now, carrying more of the scents that define this place. Tobacco, perfume, damp wood, and something faintly sweet you cannot quite identify. It settles around you, becoming part of the experience whether you intend it or not. For a moment you close your eyes. Not fully, just enough to let the sensations gather without distraction. And when you open them again, the street seems slightly different. Not because it has changed, but because you're beginning to see it more clearly. This is not just a district created by law. It is a space shaped by people adapting to that law, bending it, working within it, finding ways to survive and in some cases thrive inside its boundaries. You continue walking, and with each step, the edges of Storyville feel less like a border and more like an introduction. A threshold you have now crossed, even if you did not realize it at first. There is still so much ahead. More streets, more stories, more layers waiting quietly beneath the surface. And as the music carries faintly through the warm night air, you find yourself moving forward again, drawn deeper into a place that was never as simple as it was meant to be. You drift farther in, and the light changes again. Not brighter, not darker, just softer somehow. The gas lamps no longer feel like markers along a road, but part of the air itself, their glow settling over everything in a warm haze. The edges of buildings blur slightly, and the street begins to feel less like a straight path and more like a slow current carrying you forward. Music follows you, or perhaps you follow it. It comes from everywhere now, not loud enough to overwhelm, but steady, layered and alive. A piano plays somewhere close, its rhythm playful but precise. A cornet answers from farther down the street, its notes bending gently, stretching in ways that feel unfamiliar, yet strangely natural. There is a looseness to it, as if the musicians are not just performing but discovering something in real time. You slow listening more carefully, because this is not just background sound, it is part of the identity of this place. Many widely accepted accounts note that Storyville played a quiet but important role in the early development of jazz. Musicians who would later become well known spent time here moving between houses, experimenting with rhythm-blending traditions into something that did not yet have a name. And you can hear it happening, not as a finished form, but as something in motion, something growing. A door opens just ahead of you, and for a brief moment the music sharpens. You catch a glimpse inside, a small room, crowded but not chaotic. A piano against the wall, its keys worn from constant use. A few people seated, others standing, their attention loosely gathered around the performer. Then the door closes, and the sound softens again, returning to the street like a memory. You continue walking. The ground beneath your feet feels smoother here, more worn, as if this stretch has seen more movement, more repetition. The buildings stand closer together, their balconies almost reaching toward each other, across the narrow space above. Fabric hangs in gentle folds, catching the light, shifting slightly with the faintest breeze. You notice how the air feels warmer in this part of the district, not just from the night, but from the density of life. More people, more activity, more presence. It wraps around you close but not suffocating, like a crowded room where everyone has learned how to move without colliding. A pair of figures pass by speaking quietly. Their conversation blends into the larger murmur, but you catch a word here and there. Prices, time, names, nothing said directly, yet everything understood. It's all part of the language of this place. A lesser-known detail is how carefully communication here often relied on suggestion rather than clarity. People learn to speak in ways that reveal just enough while keeping everything else safely implied. It created a kind of shared understanding, one that allowed the district to function smoothly without drawing unnecessary attention. You find yourself listening differently now, not just to what is said, but to what is left unsaid. The street curves slightly, and as you follow it, you begin to notice a shift in the buildings themselves. Some are more refined, their exteriors carefully maintained, windows, polished entrances, marked with subtle elegance. Others are simpler, their paint worn, their details less precise. The contrast is not accidental. It reflects a quiet hierarchy that shapes every corner of Storyville. Where you go, where you are welcomed, even how long you linger, all of it influenced by these invisible layers. You pause near one of the larger houses. Its doorway is open though. A heavy curtain hangs just inside, softening the view. Light spills out onto the street, warmer and steadier than the glow of the lamps. You can hear voices within, calm and measured, accompanied by the faint clink of glass. There is a sense of order here, not strict but intentional. You remain outside, watching for a moment. A man enters, greeted with a nod from someone just inside the door. There is no hesitation, no confusion. He knows where he is, and more importantly, he knows how to behave within it. You wonder how long it takes to learn those rules, and how easy it is to forget them. Historians still argue whether places like these grand houses offered a measure of stability, or simply created another layer of separation within an already unequal system. Some suggest they provided better conditions and more structure, perhaps even a degree of protection. Others point out that they reinforced divisions, shaping experiences based on wealth status and access. As you stand there, you can almost feel both perspectives at once. The calm surface, and whatever lies beneath it. You step away, continuing down the street. The music shifts again, this time slower, more deliberate. The notes stretch out, lingering in the air before fading. It changes the pace of everything around you. Conversations quiet slightly. Movements become more measured. It feels like the night settling into itself. You pass a small group gathered near a corner, their laughter softer now, less sharp than before. One of them leans back against the wall, eyes half closed as if listening more than speaking. Another taps a gentle rhythm against their leg, keeping time with the distant piano. You realise that time moves differently here. Not in hours or minutes, but in moods, in waves of sound and silence. In the way the night deepens gradually, almost without you noticing. You take a breath. The scents have shifted too. The sharper edge of tobacco is still there, but now it is mixed with something warmer. Food, perhaps. Spices carried from a nearby kitchen. A reminder that life here is not only about what happens behind closed doors, but also about the small ordinary needs that continue alongside everything else. A woman appears on a balcony above you, resting her hands lightly on the railing. She looks out over the street, not searching for anything in particular, just observing. Her expression is calm, almost distant, as if she has seen this scene repeat itself many times before. You glance up for a moment, and then back down, because there is something about that stillness that feels private even in a place like this. You continue walking. The deeper you go, the more the district reveals itself in layers. Not all at once, but gradually, like a conversation that unfolds over time. Each step brings something new into focus, while everything behind you softens into memory. And through it all, the music remains. Sometimes clear, sometimes distant, always present. A quiet thread connecting everything. You begin to understand that this is more than a place of reputation, more than a district defined by rules or boundaries. It is a living environment shaped by the people within it, by their choices, their needs, their ways of navigating a world that does not always offer easy paths. You move forward again, carried by that steady, gentle rhythm. And somewhere ahead, the night continues to open, waiting for you to notice what comes next. You continue along the street, and almost without realizing it, the tone begins to shift again. The music is still there, drifting in soft waves, but the spaces between sounds feel wider now. The buildings stand with more intention, each one presenting itself in a slightly different way. Some draw your eye immediately, their facades polished, their windows glowing, with a warm, steady light that suggests comfort and control. Others seem quieter, set back, void attention. Their presence easy to miss unless you are looking for them. You slow your steps, because here the differences matter. A well-established historical detail explains that Storyville was never a single uniform experience. Instead, it was divided into layers that reflected social class and economic standing. Grand houses catered to wealthier visitors, offering elegance, music, and carefully curated surroundings. Smaller establishments, sometimes called cribs, provided far simpler conditions, often with far fewer protections for those working inside. You begin to notice how clearly this contrast plays out in front of you. On one side of the street, a large house rises with quiet confidence. Its entrance is framed by smooth columns, and the door stands open just enough to reveal a soft interior glow. You can hear faint laughter from within, the kind that feels measured rather than uncontrolled. There is space here, air, a sense that everything has been arranged to appear effortless. A man approaches, his coat neatly pressed, his movements unhurried. He pauses at the threshold, exchanges a few quiet words with someone inside, and then disappears beyond the curtain, as though stepping into another world entirely. You remain outside, not out of hesitation, but because the difference is already clear. Across the street, the atmosphere tightens. The buildings are closer together, their paint worn into places, their entrances less defined. Light spills out in the uneven patches, and the sounds that escape feel sharper, less controlled. Conversations rise quickly, laughter breaks more abruptly, and the music, while still present, carries a different energy. You walk toward this side. The ground feels slightly rougher here, less maintained. A door swings open as you pass, and for a brief moment you catch a glimpse inside. The room is smaller, the air thicker, the movement more immediate. There is no attempt to soften the edges. Everything is closer, louder, more direct. Then the door closes, and you are left standing in the narrow strip of street between these two versions of the same place. A lesser known but revealing detail is that prices, conditions, and expectations varied widely across the district. What someone experienced here depended heavily on where they entered, how much they could afford, and who controlled the space. This created a layered environment where luxury and hardship existed side by side, often separated by little more than a few steps. You take a breath and the air feels different again. The sweeter scents from earlier air have thinned, replaced by something heavier. Smoke-damp fabric and the faint trace of food cooking somewhere nearby. It is not unpleasant, but it feels more grounded, less polished. You notice a woman standing near one of the doorways. She does not call out, does not gesture. She simply watches the street with a steady gaze, her posture relaxed but attentive. There is a kind of quiet awareness in the way she holds herself, as if she has learned exactly how much to reveal and how much to keep hidden. You pass by slowly, and for a brief moment your eyes meet. There is no greeting, no acknowledgement beyond that glance, yet something passes between you. Not understanding exactly, but recognition of presence, of being here in this moment within this shared space. Then you move on. You begin to notice how movement itself changes depending on where you are. Near the larger houses, people walk with a certain ease, their pace unbroken, their attention focused inward. In the narrower stretches, steps become more cautious, more responsive to the shifting environment. It is not fear, but it is awareness. Those who know this place seem to carry that awareness naturally, adjusting without thinking. Those who do not stand out in subtle ways. A pause that lasts a fraction too long, a glance that lingers where it should not. You wonder how long it takes to learn that rhythm. Some researchers have reflected on whether these divisions offered any form of choice or simply reinforced existing inequalities. One line of thought suggests that different spaces allowed for varying degrees of comfort and control, creating options within the system. Another perspective points out that those options were never equally accessible, and that the structure itself ensured certain outcomes for those with fewer resources. As you walk, you can sense that tension woven into everything around you. It's present in the buildings, in the way people carry themselves, in the quiet shifts that occur from one doorway to the next. The music changes again, drifting from a faster rhythm into something slower, more reflective. It seems to soften the edges of the street, if only slightly. Conversations lower. Movements become less hurried. You pass a small group gathered near a wall, their voices low, their expressions thoughtful rather than animated. One of them gestures gently as they speak, as if explaining something that requires care. The others listen closely, nodding now and then. It is a different kind of moment. Quieter, more contained. You continue on and the street opens slightly ahead of you, giving a little more space between the buildings. The air feels easier here, less dense. You can see farther the line of lamps stretching into the distance, each one marking another small pocket of light in the growing night. You pause again just for a moment, because something in you is beginning to settle, not into comfort exactly, but into understanding. This place is not one thing, it is many things at once. It holds elegance and strain order and uncertainty, warmth and distance, all layered together in ways that do not fully separate. And as you stand there between one kind of doorway and another, you realize that the differences you see are only part of the story. There is more beneath them, more that you have not yet seen. You take another slow step forward, and the night continues to unfold around you, patient and steady as if it has all the time in the world. You move onward, and without any clear signal, the mood shifts again. The street feels steadier here, almost composed. The lamps burn with a more constant glow, and the buildings seem to hold their shape with quiet confidence. You notice that fewer people linger outside. Those who do stand with purpose, as if waiting for someone expected rather than searching for something uncertain. You begin to sense that you are approaching a different centre of gravity within Storyville, a place where control gathers. A well-documented reality of the district is the presence of madams, women, who managed many of the larger houses and shaped how those spaces operated. They were not simply figures in the background. In many cases, they ran complex businesses, set rules, handled finances, and maintained relationships with city officials and suppliers. Their influence reached far beyond the rooms inside their buildings. As you step closer to one of these houses, you can feel that structure before you even see it. The entrance stands open, framed by polished wood that reflects the lamplight in a soft sheen. A heavy curtain rests just inside, drawn slightly to the side. There is no rush here, no loud invitation, just a quiet sense that everything is already in place. You slow not out of hesitation, but out of instinct, because this feels like a threshold that expects awareness. A figure appears just inside the doorway. A woman standing with an ease that suggests familiarity with both the space and the people who enter it. Her posture is upright but not rigid. Her expression calm, observant. She does not speak immediately. Instead, she watches, taking in details with a kind of practiced attention. There is a presence to her that feels steady, measured. You realize without being told that she is in charge here. A lesser known but fascinating detail is that many madams cultivated a carefully managed image, one that balanced refinement with authority. They often selected decor music and even conversation topics to shape the atmosphere of their houses. It was not only about business. It was about creating a space that felt controlled, predictable, and appealing to those who could afford it. You remain just outside observing. The woman at the doorway exchanges a few quiet words with a man approaching from the street. The conversation is brief, almost subtle, yet it carries a sense of evaluation. A glance, a nod, and then he's allowed to pass inside. The curtain falls back into place, and the scene returns to stillness. You continue walking, though more slowly, now your attention drawn to the details that define these houses. The windows are clean, their glass catching the light in a way that feels deliberate. The balconies above are carefully arranged, not crowded, not neglected, but maintained with quiet precision. Everything suggests intention. Everything suggests control. You begin to notice how different this feels from the parts of the district you passed through earlier. The noise is softer here, the movement more contained. Even the music drifting from within carries a sense of polish. The notes are clearer, more structured, as if the performers understand exactly what is expected of them. It is not better or worse, just different. You pass another house, and this time the door opens wider for a moment. Inside you catch a clearer glimpse. A room arranged with care. Chairs placed at measured distances. Light spread evenly across the space. A few figures seated, their posture relaxed but attentive. Then the door closes again, and the image fades. Some historians continue to examine whether madams provided a degree of stability for the women working under them, or whether their authority simply reinforced another layer of dependence. One interpretation suggests that these women created structured environments that offered protection and consistency. Another view holds that this structure came at a cost, limiting autonomy and shaping lives within strict boundaries. As you walk, you can feel both possibilities in the air, the calm order and the quiet weight beneath it. You notice a carriage pulling up along the curb. Its arrival is smooth, unhurried. The driver steps down and opening the door with practiced ease. A woman emerges, her dress carefully arranged, her movements deliberate. She pauses, briefly adjusting her gloves before moving toward the entrance of one of the larger houses. The woman at the doorway greets her with a small, familiar smile. There is recognition there. Routine. This is not a place of constant unpredictability. It's a place where patterns repeat, where relationships form, where expectations are understood even when they are not spoken aloud. You take a breath. The air here feels lighter, touched by subtle fragrances that drift from within the houses. Floral notes, faint hints of polished wood, something warm and inviting that softens the edges of the night. It contrasts with the heavier scents you noticed earlier, a reminder that even within a single district, experience can shift dramatically from one corner to the next. You continue forward, your steps quieter now, almost in sync with the slower rhythm of this part of the street. The sounds around you seem to settle, creating pockets of calm between moments of activity. You begin to understand how much effort it takes to maintain this balance. It is not accidental. It is sustained. Every detail, from the way doors open to the way voices carry through the rooms, contributes to the overall impression. And at the center of it, guiding without always being seen, are the madams who hold these spaces together. You pass beneath another lamp, its light steady and warm. For a moment you feel the stillness more clearly, not empty, not silent, but composed. And as you move beyond it, continuing deeper into Storyville, you carry that sense of structure with you. Aware now that beneath the shifting surface of this district lies a network of control, care and quiet authority that shapes everything within it. You move beyond the polished entrances, and the quiet structure you just felt begins to soften again. Not disappear, just loosen. The street narrows slightly, and with it the rhythm becomes more personal, less arranged. The steady confidence of the grand houses gives way to something closer to the ground, where routines are not announced, but lived, repeated night after night in small, careful patterns. You begin to notice the details of those patterns. A door opens, not with ceremony, but with familiarity. A woman steps out, adjusting the sleeve of her dress as she glances briefly up and down the street. Her movements are efficient, practiced. She is not waiting for attention, she is managing time. You pass her quietly, and as you do, you start to understand that the night here is not just an experience, it is work. A widely accepted observation about Storyville is that for many women, survival depended on maintaining routines that balanced appearance, endurance, and caution. Their evenings were shaped by a preparation, interaction, and constant awareness of both opportunity and risk. There was little space for randomness. Even small actions carried meaning. You slow your pace again, because once you begin to notice this, it becomes impossible to ignore. Another doorway, slightly open, reveals a narrow interior space. You glimpse a mirror on the wall, its surface catching a fragment of lamplight. A figure stands before it, adjusting her hair with steady hands. Not hurried, not uncertain, just focused. Then the door closes, and the moment folds back into the street. A lesser-known but telling detail is that many women developed small personal rituals to carry them through the night. Adjusting clothing, checking appearance, pausing briefly before stepping outside. These acts may seem simple, but they created a sense of control within an environment that often offered very little of it. You walk on and the air feels closer here. The scents are stronger, more immediate. Powder fabric, faint traces of perfume layered over the lingering presence of smoke and damp wood. It is not overwhelming, but it stays with you, settling into your awareness in a way that feels constant. A group stands near a corner, their voices low but steady. One of the women laughs softly, the sound brief, almost contained, as if shaped to fit the space rather than fill it. Another leans slightly against the wall, her posture relaxed but alert, her eyes following the movement of people passing by. You notice how often they observe, not in a way that draws attention, but in a way that gathers information. Who is arriving? Who is leaving? Who seems familiar? Who does not? You continue walking, and the ground beneath your feet feels worn again, marked by repetition. This part of the district does not hide its use. It carries it openly in the texture of the street, in the edges of doorways, in the way light spills unevenly from one building to the next. You pass another figure, this time moving quickly, her steps light but purposeful. She disappears into a nearby doorway without hesitation, the motion so smooth it feels almost rehearsed. You wonder how many times she has made that same movement, and how little attention it now requires. Some historians suggest that these routines offered a form of agency, a way for women to navigate their circumstances with skill and awareness. Others point out that the very need for such routines reflects the limitations placed upon them, shaping lives within boundaries that were rarely chosen freely. As you move forward, you can sense both sides of that perspective, the control within the moment, and the larger structure that defines it. The music here is softer, more distant. It reaches you in fragments carried from other streets, other rooms. Without the stronger presence of it, the smaller sounds become clearer. Footsteps, fabric shifting, a quiet voice speaking just out of earshot. It creates a different kind of atmosphere, more intimate, more immediate. You pass by a small window, its curtain drawn halfway. Through the gap you catch a glimpse of a dimly lit room. A table, a chair, a single lamp casting a soft circle of light. It feels quieter inside, almost separate from the movement of the street. Then the curtain shifts, and the view is gone. You continue, and the street opens just enough to let a faint breeze move through. It carries with it a hint of the river, cool and distant, cutting briefly through the warmth that has settled around you. For a moment, everything feels lighter. Then the warmth returns. A woman steps into your path, not blocking you, but close enough that you become aware of her presence immediately. She meets your gaze for a brief second, her expression neutral, almost unreadable. Then she steps aside, allowing you to pass without a word. It is a small interaction, but it lingers, because there is a quiet understanding in it, a shared awareness of space, of movement, of the unspoken rules that guide both. You walk on, and as you do, you begin to notice how the night seems to stretch differently here. Time does not feel divided into clear segments. It flows shaped by activity rather than hours. Moments blend into one another, marked more by changes in sound and light than by anything else. You take a breath. The air feels heavier again, filled with the steady presence of everything around you. It is not uncomfortable, but it reminds you that this environment demands attention even when it appears calm. You pass beneath another lamp, and for a brief moment the light settles around you, soft and steady. It gives you a clearer view of the street ahead of the figures moving within it, of the quiet patterns repeating in ways both visible and hidden. And then you step beyond it, back into the softer glow, back into the rhythm. You realize now that what you are seeing is not a single story, but many unfolding at once. Each person carrying their own version of the night, shaped by circumstance, by choice, by necessity. And as you continue deeper into Storyville, you carry that awareness with you, moving gently through a world where every small action holds meaning, and every moment is part of a larger, quieter struggle to endure. You continue forward, and almost without noticing when it happens, the sound begins to gather again. At first, it is faint, a scattered collection of notes drifting through the warm air. Then, step by step, it becomes more present. A piano line steadies itself somewhere ahead, its rhythm clear and confident. A horn joins in, bending its tone in a way that feels expressive rather than precise. There is a looseness here, but also intention, as if each musician understands the direction even while allowing the moment to guide them. You follow it. Not quickly, not with urgency, but with quiet curiosity. The street opens slowly, and you find yourself near a doorway, where the music spills more freely into the night. The light inside flickers against the frame, casting soft shapes that shift as people move within. The air carries a new layer of scent now, something warmer, mixed with the faint trace of wood and polished surfaces. You pause near the entrance, not stepping in, just listening. A firmly grounded historical observation is that Storyville became a gathering place for musicians who would later shape the sound of early jazz. Performers moved between venues, carrying ideas with them, blending rhythms and influences in ways that gradually formed a new musical language. What you are hearing now is not yet defined, but it is unmistakably alive. The piano quickens slightly, then slows again as if testing its own rhythm. The horn responds, stretching a note just a fraction longer than expected. Someone inside taps along, keeping time with a steady, almost instinctive motion. You close your eyes for a brief moment, and the sound becomes clearer. It is not perfect. It is not meant to be. It shifts, adjusts, finds its shape in real time. When you open your eyes again, the doorway feels closer than before. A figure steps out, pausing just beyond the threshold. He leans lightly against the wall, listening to the music from the outside as if it sounds different from here. You wonder if it does. A lesser known but intriguing detail is that many musicians in Storyville worked long, irregular hours, often playing in multiple locations throughout the night. They adapted their style depending on the room, the audience, and the atmosphere, allowing the music to evolve in subtle ways with each performance. You begin to notice those subtle shifts. The tempo changes slightly as someone new joins in. The rhythm tightens, then loosens again. It feels like a conversation not in words but in sound, each note responding to the last, building something that exists only in this moment. You remain where you are, letting it unfold. People pass behind you, their footsteps blending into the rhythm. A carriage moves slowly along the street, its wheels creating a soft, steady pattern, that almost matches the beat inside. Even the quiet murmur of voices seems to fall into place, becoming part of the larger composition. You take a breath, and the air feels different here. Not heavier, not lighter, but more connected, as if everything around you is linked by this shared current of sound. A woman steps into the doorway, her hand resting lightly against the frame. She listens for a moment, her expression calm, then turns back inside without a word. It is a small gesture, but it carries a sense of familiarity, of having experienced this countless times before. You shift your weight slightly, still outside, still observing, because there is something about staying on the edge that allows you to notice more. The way the music reaches outward, the way it touches the street without fully leaving the room it comes from. Some scholars continue to examine how much of jazz's early development can be directly traced to Storyville and how much emerged from the wider cultural landscape of New Orleans. One line of thought emphasizes the district as a central hub where styles blended freely. Another perspective suggests that while Storyville played a role, the music's roots extend far beyond any single location. As you listen, it feels less important to define, more important to experience. The piano slows again, the notes stretching out, leaving more space between them. The horn follows softer now, its tone almost reflective. The shift changes the atmosphere around you. Conversations nearby lower in volume. Movements become more measured. It is as if the music gently reshapes the night. You notice a small group gathered a short distance away. They are not speaking much, just standing together listening. One of them taps a quiet rhythm against their palm. Another nods slightly in time with the beat. They are part of it even without entering the room. You realize that the boundaries here are more fluid than they seem. The music does not stay contained. It moves outward, blending with the street, becoming something shared rather than owned. You take another breath, and for a moment everything feels still, not salient, but balanced. The kind of stillness that exists within movement where nothing stops yet. Everything feels steady. Then the rhythm shifts again. A quicker pattern emerges, the piano leading with a brighter tone. The horn responds with a playful note, almost teasing. Laughter rises from inside, carried briefly into the night before settling back into the room. You find yourself smiling slightly, not because of anything specific, but because the energy has changed. It feels lighter, more open, as if the music has created a small pocket of ease within the larger complexity of the district. You remain there a little longer, listening, letting the sound settle into your awareness, and then slowly you begin to move again. The music follows you for a few steps, then fades, becoming part of the background once more, but does not disappear completely. It lingers, a quiet thread woven into everything around you. As you continue deeper into Storyville, you carry that rhythm with you. Aware now that beneath the layers of structure, routine, and tension, there is also creation, something forming, something that will outlast the streets themselves. And as the night stretches on, you begin to understand that this place, for all its contradictions, is not only a space of survival, but also one where something entirely new is finding its voice. You move on, and the music fades just enough to make room for something else. Not silence, but a softer layer of the night that you had not fully noticed before. The street widens slightly, and with it comes a different rhythm, one shaped less by performance and more by pause. You begin to notice small clusters forming near doorways and corners. People standing together, not in anticipation but in brief rest. Conversations here feel quieter, less guarded, as if this part of the evening allows a moment to breathe. You slow without thinking, because something about this space invites it. A grounded historical observation is that long nights in Storyville were sustained not only by work and music, but by simple routines of food and drink. Workers, performers, and visitors all relied on small moments of nourishment to continue through the hours. These pauses, though easy to overlook, were essential to keeping the district in motion. You notice it now. A man stands near a small cart handing over a wrapped portion of something warm. The scent reaches you before you see it clearly. Bread, perhaps, or a simple stew carried in a tin container. The aroma is soft but comforting, cutting gently through the heavier scents that have lingered in the air. You step a little closer. Not enough to interrupt, just enough to observe. The exchange is brief, coins pass hands, a quiet word is spoken. Then the moment ends and both return to their separate rhythms. You continue walking, and as you do, you begin to notice more of these small rituals. A woman sitting just inside a doorway sipping slowly from a glass, her posture relaxed in a way that suggests this is one of the few moments she allows herself to pause. A pair of figures sharing a quick meal, their conversation low and steady, more about presence than content. These are not grand scene, but they carry weight. A lesser-known but revealing detail is that many establishments provided food and drink not only for customers but for those working inside. These offerings were often simple, yet they played a quiet role in maintaining energy and routine through the long, humid nights. You take a breath. The air here feels layered in a different way now. Less sharp, more rounded. The scent of cooked food blends with faint traces of alcohol with the ever-present hint of smoke with something warm and human that is difficult to name but easy to recognize. You pass by a doorway where laughter spills out softer than before, less abrupt. Inside, a small group sits together, glasses in hand, their movements unhurried. One leans back slightly, eyes half closed, as if savouring a brief moment of stillness before returning to whatever comes next. You do not linger, but the image stays with you. Some historians suggest that these quieter intervals offered a kind of emotional reset within the night, a way for individuals to gather themselves before continuing. Others point out that even these moments were shaped by necessity, brief pauses, rather than true rest defined by the demands of the environment. As you move forward, you sense that balance, the comfort, and the limit of it. The street curves gently, and with it comes a shift in sound. The music you heard earlier returns but softer, carried from a distance. It blends with the murmur of conversation, with the occasional clink of glass, with the steady rhythm of footsteps moving through the space. It feels less like a performance now, more like a backdrop. You notice a small table set near the edge of the street, its surface worn but clean. A lantern rests at its centre, casting a warm, steady light. Two figures sit across from each other, their conversation quiet, their gestures slow and deliberate. You pass by without interrupting, and for a moment you feel the pull of that stillness, the kind that exists in the middle of motion. You continue walking. The ground beneath your feet feels smoother again, as if this part of the street has been shaped by slower movement, by pauses, rather than constant passing. It creates a different rhythm in your steps, one that matches the atmosphere around you. You begin to notice how time feels here, not measured by the clock, but by moments like these, a sip of something warm, a shared glance, a quiet breath taken between action. A woman stands near a window holding a small plate, eating slowly. Her posture is relaxed, her attention turned inward for just a moment. The light from inside the room falls gently across her face, softening the edges of the scene. You do not look for long, because it feels private. Even here, you move on, and as you do, the street begins to narrow again, the sense of pause gradually giving way to motion. The clusters thin, the sounds sharpen slightly. The music becomes clearer once more. But something has changed, not in the district, in your awareness of it. You understand now that this place is sustained not only by its more visible elements, but by these quieter, often overlooked moments, the simple acts that allow everything else to continue. You take another breath, and the air carries a trace of warmth with it, something grounding, something steady. It stays with you as you walk, a reminder that even in a place defined by movement and complexity, there are still moments of calm, small and fleeting, that hold everything together. And as you move deeper into the night, that understanding settles quietly within you, shaping the way you see what comes next. You step forward again, and the rhythm of the street begins to widen. Not physically, but in the way it feels. The movement grows more varied, less predictable. You begin to notice how many different kinds of people pass through this place, each carrying their own pace, their own reason for being here. A man in a worn coat walks by his steps, steady, his gaze fixed ahead as if following a familiar route. Just behind him, two younger figures move with restless energy, their laughter quick, their attention shifting from one doorway to the next. A carriage slows nearby, and from it steps someone dressed with careful precision, their posture upright, their expression composed. You pause slightly, because the contrast is striking. A well-established historical reality is that Storyville drew visitors from across a wide range of social backgrounds. Sailors arriving from distant ports, local labourers seeking distraction, travelling businessmen, curious tourists, and even wealthier residents all moved through the district. For a brief time their paths crossed here in ways that would have been unlikely elsewhere in the city. You watch them pass, and for a moment it feels like the entire world has gathered in this one stretch of street. But the longer you observe, the more you begin to notice the subtle separations that remain. The way certain people gravitate toward particular buildings, the way others move more cautiously as if unsure of where they belong. It's not a single shared experience. It is many overlapping ones. A lesser-known but interesting detail is how regular visitors often developed preferred routes and routines within the district. Certain houses, certain streets, even certain times of night became part of a pattern that felt predictable, almost comforting in its repetition. You begin to see that pattern now. A man passes you nodding briefly to someone across the street. The acknowledgement is small, but it carries familiarity. He does not hesitate as he approaches a doorway, disappearing inside with quiet confidence. This is not his first time here. You continue walking, and the sounds shift around you once more. Laughter rises from one direction, sharper and more animated than before. From another, a quieter conversation unfolds, its tone measured, almost reflective. The music remains, though it feels more distant now, woven into the background rather than leading the scene. You take a breath. The air feels thicker, again touched by the presence of so many people moving through it. Tobacco smoke lingers more heavily here, mixing with the faint sweetness of perfume, and the occasional trace of something warm from nearby kitchens. It creates a kind of layered atmosphere, dense but alive. A group gathers near the edge of the street, their conversation animated. One gestures broadly, their voice rising slightly before settling again. Another listens with a half smile, their attention divided between the speaker and the movement around them. You pass by slowly, and as you do, you notice how their energy contrasts with others nearby. A woman stands alone near a doorway, her posture calm, her gaze steady. She does not engage with the group, but she is aware of them just as she is aware of everything else around her. It is a quiet form of attention, constant. Some historians have explored whether Storyville truly blurred social boundaries or simply created the appearance of it. One interpretation suggests that the district allowed for a rare mixing of classes, bringing people into closer proximity than usual. Another perspective argues that these divisions remained firmly in place, shaping interactions even when they were less visible. As you walk, you can feel that tension, the closeness, and the distance within it. You notice a pair of sailors leaning against a wall, their posture relaxed but slightly unsteady. Their voices carry a different rhythm shaped by accents that hint at places far beyond this city. They laugh at something you do not hear, their amusement easy, uncontained. For them, this place may be temporary, a brief stop between journeys. Just ahead, a man in a darker coat walks with measured steps, his attention focused, his movements controlled. He does not linger, does not look around unnecessarily. He moves with purpose, as if following a plan already set in his mind. You wonder what brings each of them here, and what they take with them when they leave. The street continues to shift as you move through it. The clusters of people form and dissolve conversations, beginning and ending in quiet cycles. Doors open and close each moment, revealing just enough to suggest what lies beyond without fully showing it. You begin to notice how your own movement has changed. Slower, more deliberate, not because you are unsure, but because there is so much to take in. A carriage passes behind you, its wheels creating a soft, steady rhythm that briefly draws your attention. The driver sits upright, guiding the horse with calm precision, as if this route is as familiar to him as any other. It's part of the system, just another thread in the larger pattern. You step aside slightly to let it pass, and as you do, you catch a glimpse of the passenger inside. Their face is partially hidden by shadow, their expression unreadable. For a moment they seem distant from everything around them, enclosed within their own quiet space. Then the carriage moves on, and the moment is gone. You continue forward. And as you do, the sense of movement around you grows more complex, not chaotic, but layered. Each person following their own path, yet all of them contributing to the same shifting environment. You begin to understand that this is what defines Storyville as much as anything else. Not just the buildings, not just the music, but the people, the constant flow of individuals, each bringing their own story, their own purpose, their own quiet expectations into the space. And as you walk deeper into it, you carry that awareness with you, moving gently through a place where every passing figure adds another layer to the night. You continue forward and something subtle begins to change again. Not in the buildings, not in the light, but in the feeling beneath it all. The air seems to carry a quieter tension now, one that is not immediately visible, yet present in the way people move in the spaces they choose, in the brief glances that pass between them. You begin to notice patterns. Who stands where? Who walks freely? Who lingers at the edges? A well-grounded historical understanding is that Storyville, like much of New Orleans at the time, operated within a complex racial structure. Laws and social customs shaped where people could live, work, and move. Even within this district, where boundaries seem to soften on the surface, those divisions remain deeply embedded in daily life. You slow your pace, because this is not something you can see all at once. It reveals itself in small ways. A group stands near a doorway, their conversation easy, their posture relaxed. A few steps away, another figure remains slightly apart, not excluded outright, but not fully included either. The distance between them is small, yet it carries meaning. You pass by quietly, and as you do, you begin to sense how awareness shapes movement here. People do not always look directly, but they notice. They adjust. They choose their paths with care, guided by an understanding that is rarely spoken aloud. A lesser known but important detail is the presence of Creole communities within Storyville, particularly individuals of mixed heritage who often occupied a distinct social position. In some cases, they had access to opportunities that were limited for others, yet they also navigated expectations and restrictions that placed them in a category of their own. You begin to see how layered this environment truly is, not divided in simple lines, but in overlapping circles that shift depending on context, location, and circumstance. The music continues somewhere nearby, but it feels more distant now, as if it has stepped back to allow other elements to come forward. Voices carry more clearly, footsteps seem more deliberate, even the pauses between sounds feel more defined. You take a breath, and the air feels heavier again, though not in the same way as before. It is not density from crowd or movement. It is something quieter, more reflective, as if the space itself holds the weight of these unseen structures. You pass a small group gathered beneath a lamp. Their conversation is low-measured, their expressions calm. One of them gestures gently, their words careful, as if aware of who might be listening even in passing. You move on. And as you do, you notice how certain doorways seem to welcome some while remaining closed to others. Not always visibly, not through signs or barriers, but through subtle cues that guide behavior. A glance, a pause, a slight shift in posture. You begin to understand that these signals are learned over time, absorbed, carried. Some historians continue to explore how rigid these divisions were within Storyville itself. One perspective suggests that the district allowed for a degree of interaction across racial lines that was less common elsewhere in the South. Another view emphasizes that while proximity increased, equality did not follow, and that the underlying hierarchy remained firmly in a place. As you walk, both ideas seem present. You see moments of connection and moments of separation. A musician passes by you carrying his instrument with quiet care. He moves with purpose, his step steady, his focus directed toward a destination you cannot see. His presence feels grounded, shaped by routine rather than uncertainty. You watch him go, and for a moment you wonder where he will play next and who will listen. The street narrows slightly and the light shifts again, becoming softer, more contained. The buildings lean closer, their shadows stretching across the ground in uneven patterns. You step carefully, your awareness sharpened by the subtle changes around you. A woman stands near a window, her posture composed, her gaze directed outward. She does not move as you pass, but there is a stillness in her presence that feels intentional, as if she is holding her place within the space with quiet determination. You do not linger, but you notice. The sounds of the street continue steady and layered, yet your attention now moves beneath them, drawn to the quieter currents that shape everything here. You begin to realize that Storyville is not only defined by what is visible, but by what is understood without being spoken. The boundaries, the expectations, the unspoken agreements that guide behavior from one moment to the next. You take another breath, and the air carries a faint trace of warmth with it, mixed with something else you cannot quite name. It feels older somehow, as if it has been shaped by years of repetition of patterns established and maintained over time. You continue walking, and as you do, the night feels deeper, more layered than before. Not darker, but richer in its complexity. You're no longer just observing the surface, you're beginning to sense the structures beneath it, the quiet forces that shape how this place functions. The music returns, faintly drifting from a distance, soft and steady. A reminder that even within these layered divisions, there are shared elements that connect everything together. You follow the sound for a few steps, then pause again, because now you understand that every part of this district carries more than one story. And as you move forward once more, you do so with a quieter awareness, noticing not just what is present, but how it is shaped, how it moves, and how it holds together in ways that are both visible and unseen. You move on, and the street begins to take on a slightly different character again, not in its structure, but in how it presents itself to you. There is a new layer here, something quieter, more deliberate. You start to notice small signs near entrances, subtle details that feel almost official, a neatly painted number, a polished door with a card placed just so, a name spoken in passing that seems to carry more meaning than it should. You slow your steps, because this feels less like chance and more like presentation. A well-documented aspect of Storyville is the existence of printed guides, often called blue books, which listed houses, addresses, and descriptions in a tone that suggested order and refinement. These publications allowed visitors to navigate the district with surprising ease, turning something complex into something that could be read, selected, and approached with confidence. You imagine holding one now, standing under the soft glow of a lamp, scanning the page, deciding where to go next, as if choosing from a menu. It feels strange to think of it that way, and yet here in this moment it makes a certain kind of sense. You glance at a nearby doorway. The entrance is clean, the wood carefully maintained, the light inside steady and warm. There is nothing about it that feels hidden. Instead, it presents itself openly, almost politely, as if inviting attention rather than avoiding it. You continue walking, and as you do, you begin to notice how language itself shifts in this part of the district. Conversations carry a different tone. Words are chosen more carefully. Descriptions become softer, more indirect. A woman speaks quietly to a man near the entrance of a house, her voice low, her phrasing measured. You cannot hear every word, but you catch enough to understand the pattern. Nothing is said too plainly. Everything is framed in a way that feels controlled, almost refined. It is a kind of performance, not dramatic, not exaggerated, but intentional. A lesser-known but revealing detail is how these guidebooks often used coded descriptions to suggest atmosphere and clientele without stating anything directly. Phrases hinted at elegance, discretion, or liveliness, allowing readers to interpret the meaning while maintaining a surface of respectability. You begin to recognize those hints in the way people speak, in the way they describe places, in the way they present themselves. You pass a small group standing near a corner, their conversation quiet but focused. One of them gestures toward a building down the street, speaking in a tone that suggests recommendation rather than instruction. The others listen, nodding slightly, their expressions thoughtful. It feels almost like planning, like choosing an experience. You move on, and the street continues to reveal this curated side of itself. The chaos you sensed earlier has not disappeared, but it has been shaped, guided into forms that feel easier to understand, easier to navigate. Some historians have examined whether this presentation helped normalize the district or simply masked its realities behind a polished surface. One interpretation suggests that by organizing and describing the space, it became more accessible and less intimidating to outsiders. Another view holds that this structure created a kind of illusion, one that softened the perception without changing the underlying conditions. As you walk, you can feel that contrast, the clarity, and the concealment within it. You pause near a doorway where a small card rests just inside the frame. It is simple, unadorned, yet placed with care. You cannot read it clearly from where you stand, but its presence alone suggests a system, a method of identification that fits into the larger pattern you're beginning to see. You do not step closer, but you notice. A carriage passes slowly behind you, its movement steady, its presence almost quiet despite its size. The driver glances toward the row of houses as if aware of the choices laid out before anyone arriving here. You take a breath. The air feels slightly cooler in this part of the street, though the warmth has not fully left. It carries the same layered scents, but they seem more subdued, as if even they have been shaped to fit the atmosphere. You continue walking, and as you do, the idea of selection becomes clearer. This is not just a place you enter, it is a place you choose how to move through. Where you go, how you present yourself, what you expect, all of it guided by signals both obvious and subtle. A man steps out of a nearby house, adjusting his coat as he pauses on the threshold. His expression is calm, his movements unhurried. He glances briefly at the street, then turns and walks in a direction that suggests familiarity. You watch him go, and for a moment you wonder how many times he's followed that same path. The music returns faintly, carried from somewhere deeper within the district. It blends with the murmur of voices, with the soft rhythm of footsteps, creating a background that feels steady and continuous. You realize that this layer of Storyville is not separate from the others. It sits alongside them, interwoven, a way of shaping perception without fully altering reality. You take another step forward, and as you do, the night feels more structured than before, not in a rigid sense, but in a way that guides without forcing, that presents without revealing everything at once. You carry that awareness with you as you move deeper into the district, understanding now that what you see is not only what exists, but also what has been carefully arranged to be seen. And somewhere beyond the next stretch of street, more layers wait quietly ready to unfold as you continue. You move forward and the tone shifts once more, quieter, firmer, as if something official hums beneath the surface. It is not announced. It is felt. A man in a uniform stands near a corner, his posture relaxed, his presence steady rather than imposing. He speaks with someone just out of earshot, his voice low, almost conversational. There is no urgency in his movements, no sign of tension yet. He does not blend into the background either. He belongs here, in a way that feels both expected and slightly out of place. A well-supported historical point is that Storyville operated under a system of regulation that included periodic medical examinations and oversight by local authorities. Officials attempted to maintain order through inspections and rules, creating a framework that suggested control, even if that control was not always consistent in practice. You slow your pace, because this part of the district carries a different kind of weight, not the fluid rhythm of music, not the quiet routines of work, but the presence of structure of systems that exist to observe, record and manage. You pass the officer, your steps quiet, your attention sharpened. He glances briefly in your direction, not with suspicion, but with a kind of practiced awareness. Then his gaze shifts again, following the movement of the street. You continue walking, and as you do, you begin to notice how this presence of authority shapes the space around it. Conversations soften slightly when uniforms are nearby. Movements become more measured. Even the doors seem to open and close with a touch more care. It is subtle, but it is there. A lesser known but revealing detail is how enforcement within Storyville often depended on informal arrangements as much as official rules. Relationships between house managers and local authorities could influence how strictly regulations were applied, creating a system that was structured on paper yet flexible in reality. You begin to sense that flexibility now. A woman steps out of a doorway just ahead, pausing for a moment as she looks toward the corner where the officer stands. Her expression remains calm, but her posture shifts slightly more upright, more composed. After a brief moment, she turns and moves in the opposite direction, her step steady. You watch her go, and you understand. Not fully, but enough to feel the adjustment. You continue along the street and the sounds begin to separate again. The music feels more distant here, less central. In its place you hear the quieter details, the murmur of voices, the soft scrape of a chair moving across a floor inside a nearby room, the faint closing of a door. It creates a different kind of rhythm, one shaped by observation. You pass another doorway and for a moment it opens wider than expected. Inside you catch a glimpse of a small room arranged with care. A table sits near the centre papers resting on its surface. A figure leans over them, writing slowly, deliberately. Then the door closes, and the moment disappears. Some historians continue to debate how effective these regulatory systems truly were. One interpretation suggests that they provided a degree of oversight that could not exist in a completely hidden environment. Another perspective argues that the appearance of control often masked inconsistencies, allowing issues to persist beneath the surface. As you walk, you can feel that uncertainty, the structure, and the spaces within it where structure loosens. You notice another uniformed figure farther down the street standing near a carriage. This one remains still watching rather than speaking. The driver beside him shifts slightly, adjusting his position as if aware of being observed even without direct interaction. You take a breath. The air feels cooler here, though. The warmth of the night has not entirely faded. It carries a faint sharpness, something cleaner, as if the presence of authority subtly alters the atmosphere itself. You continue forward, and the street begins to widen again, the sense of oversight easing as you move away from the corner. The sounds blend once more, the music returning in soft layers, the conversations growing more fluid. But the awareness remains. You begin to understand that this system does not disappear. It moves, it shifts, it watches from different angles. A man passes you his steps, measured, his gaze forward. He nods briefly towards someone standing near a doorway, a small gesture that suggests familiarity. There's a sense of routine in it, a quiet acknowledgement of shared understanding. You walk on, and as you do, you notice how people adapt to this environment without breaking their rhythm. Movements adjust, voices shift, but the flow continues. It is not interrupted. It simply changes shape. A woman leans lightly against a wall. Her posture relaxed, her attention turned toward the street. She watches as a pair of figures pass by, her expression unreadable. There is no tension in her stance, only awareness. You pass her quietly, and for a moment you feel the weight of being seen. Not judged, just noticed. You take another step, and the street begins to soften again, the presence of authority fading into the background, though never entirely gone. The music grows clearer, the voice is more open, the movement more fluid. Yet something has shifted in your understanding. You see now that beneath the rhythm of Storyville lies a system of observation of rules that guide behavior even when they are not enforced directly. A structure that shapes the environment in ways both visible and hidden. You carry that awareness with you as you move deeper into the night. Because now every doorway, every conversation, every quiet glance carries a little more meaning. And as the sounds of the district gather around you once more, you continue forward, aware that this place is held together not only by what happens within it, but by the systems that quietly watch over it. You move onward, and the street begins to feel fuller in a different way. Not louder, not brighter, just more complete. You start to notice the people who are not part of the music, not standing at doorways, not drifting between buildings. They move with purpose, but without drawing attention. Their presence is steady, almost invisible at first, until you begin to look more carefully. A door opens and a man steps out carrying a bundle of linens folded with care. He does not pause, does not look around. He turns down the street and disappears into the dimmer stretch beyond the lamps. You watch him go, and suddenly the district feels larger than it did a moment ago. A clearly documented reality is that Storyville relied on a wide network of workers beyond those most often mentioned. Laundresses, cooks, cleaners, porters, and errand runners all played essential roles in keeping the district functioning. Without them, the carefully maintained rhythm you have been moving through would not hold together for long. You slow your pace, because once you notice this layer, it becomes impossible to ignore. A woman passes you carrying a small basket, its contents covered with cloth. Her steps are quick but controlled. her attention focused on where she is going rather than what surrounds her. She moves through the space as if following a route she knows well, adjusting her path instinctively as others pass. You step slightly aside to give her room. She nods faintly, not stopping, not speaking, and then she is gone. A lesser known but telling detail is how much of this labour took place quietly, often at the edges of attention. Supplies needed to be delivered, rooms prepared, clothing cleaned, food arranged. These tasks did not define the reputation of Storyville, yet they sustained it in ways that were constant and necessary. You begin to see it everywhere now. A door left open just long enough for someone to carry in a crate. A figure moving quickly between buildings, with a tray balanced carefully in their hands. A brief exchange at a back entrance hidden from the main flow of the street. It creates a second rhythm beneath the first. One that is not shaped by performance or presentation, but by function. You continue walking, and the sounds shift again, not disappearing but layering more densely. The music is still there, the conversation still unfolding, but now you hear the quieter elements as well. The soft thud of something being set down, the faint rustle of fabric being folded, the subtle creak of a door opening just enough to pass through. It is a different kind of movement, less visible, but no less important. Some historians have reflected on how these forms of labour remain underrepresented in accounts of Storyville, overshadowed by more dramatic elements. One interpretation suggests that this reflects broader patterns in historical memory where everyday work is often overlooked. Another view emphasises that understanding these roles is essential to seeing the full picture of how the district operated. As you walk, you begin to understand why, because this layer connects everything else. Without it, the music would falter, the rooms would empty, the structure would loosen. You pass a narrow alleyway and for a moment you catch a glimpse of activity within it. A figure bends slightly, adjusting a crate. Another stands nearby, speaking in low tones. The light does not reach fully into the space, leaving parts of it in shadow. Then you move past, and the scene fades behind you. You take a breath. The air here feels more grounded, less shaped by scent alone. There is a faint trace of soap of clean fabric mixed with the familiar warmth of the night. It creates a sense of continuity, a reminder that beneath everything else there are practical needs being met. You notice a young boy moving quickly along the edge of the street. His steps light, his path precise. He carries a small parcel, holding it carefully as he weaves through the space. He does not look around, does not slow. His focus is entirely on reaching his destination. You watch him for a moment, and then he disappears into a doorway. You continue forward, and the street begins to open slightly again, the density of movement easing just enough to let the layers separate once more. The music becomes clearer, the voices more distinct, but the awareness of what lies beneath remains. You cannot unsee it now. A woman stands near a back entrance, speaking quietly with someone inside. Her posture is relaxed, but her attention is sharp. She nods once, then turns, carrying something small and wrapped as she moves away. You pass her without interrupting, and for a moment you feel the quiet coordination of everything around you. Not planned in a visible sense, but connected. You begin to understand that Storyville is not held together by any single element. Not by music, not by structure, not by presentation, but by the constant interplay of all these parts, each one supporting the others. Each one necessary in its own way. You take another step, and the street continues to unfold ahead of you, revealing more layers, more movements, more quiet exchanges that shape the night without announcing themselves. The music drifts closer again, soft and steady. The voices gather, the lamps glow, and beneath it all, the unseen work continues steady and essential, carrying the district forward moment by moment. You continue forward, and the air changes again. It is not obvious at first. The music still drifts through the street, the lamps still cast their warm glow, and people still move with that familiar rhythm you have come to recognize. Yet beneath it all, something feels quieter, more uncertain, as if the night itself is holding its breath in places you cannot immediately see. You slow without meaning to, because this layer does not announce itself. It reveals itself gradually. A well-established understanding of life in districts like Storyville is that danger rarely arrived as a single dramatic moment. More often it existed in quieter forms in illness, in debt, in sudden changes that could shift a life without warning. These were the risks that lingered beneath the surface, shaping daily choices in ways that were not always visible. You take a breath, and the air feels heavier now, not with crowd or movement, but with something more subtle. A sense of fragility that moves quietly through the space, touching certain corners more than others. You pass a doorway where the light inside seems dimmer than those you've seen before. The curtain is drawn, but not fully. Through the gap you catch a glimpse of a still room, a chair, a table, a figure seated unmoving for a moment longer than expected. Then the curtain shifts, and the view is gone. You continue walking, and the sounds begin to separate again. The laughter you heard earlier feels more distant, less frequent. Conversations carry a softer tone, their edges less defined. Even the music seems to stretch out its notes, lingering longer, as if moving more slowly through the air. A lesser-known but significant detail is how illness, particularly diseases that spread quietly, shaped life in Storyville. Regular medical checks existed, but they could not prevent every risk. For many, the uncertainty surrounding health was a constant presence, influencing both personal choices and the structure of the district itself. You begin to sense that uncertainty now, not as something visible, but as something felt. A woman passes you, her steps slower than those you've seen before. Her posture remains composed, but there is a carefulness in her movement, as if each step is measured not out of hesitation but out of necessity. You watch her for a moment, then you move on. The street narrows slightly and the light from the lamps becomes more uneven, leaving small patches of shadow between them. In those spaces, the atmosphere feels different, quieter, more contained. You step through one of those shadows, and for a moment the sounds around you soften, almost completely. Then you emerge back into the light. Some historians have explored how much of Storyville's reputation focused on its more visible elements, while the quieter realities of hardship remained less discussed. One perspective suggests that public attention often centered on spectacle rather than the underlying conditions. Another view emphasizes that these hidden aspects were always present, shaping the experiences of those within the district in profound ways. As you walk, you begin to understand that contrast more clearly, the brightness and the dimness within it. You pass a small group standing close together, their voices low, their expressions serious. There is no laughter here, no lightness. One of them speaks softly, the others listening with quiet attention. You do not hear the words, but you feel the weight of them. You continue forward, and the air carries a different scent now. Still warm, still layered, but touched with something sharper. Medicine, perhaps, or simply the absence of the sweeter notes you noticed earlier. It creates a subtle shift, one that is difficult to define but easy to recognize. A door opens just ahead and a figure steps out, quickly glancing once over their shoulder before closing it behind them. The motion is brief, almost instinctive, but it leaves an impression. Something inside that room remains unseen. You move past without stopping, and the street begins to widen again, the light returning to a more even glow, the sounds gathering once more into a steady rhythm. Yet the awareness of what you have just sensed does not fade. It stays with you. A reminder that this place holds more than what it shows. You notice a woman seated near a window, her posture still, her gaze directed outward. She does not move as you pass, but there is a quiet presence in the way she remains there, as if holding her place within the space despite whatever weight she carries. You do not linger, but you remember. You take another breath, and the air feels slightly cooler now, as if the night has shifted, settling into a deeper phase. The movement around you continues, but it feels more measured, more deliberate. You begin to understand that endurance is part of this environment, not in a dramatic sense, but in the quiet persistence of moving forward moment by moment through whatever the night brings. You continue walking, and as you do, the music returns more clearly, the voices grow a little lighter, the lamps burn a little steadier. The district resumes its outward rhythm, its familiar patterns. Yet something has changed in how you see it. You are aware now of the fragility beneath the surface, of the risks that do not announce themselves, of the quiet ways people adapt, adjust, and continue despite them. And as you move deeper into Storyville, you carry that awareness with you. walking gently through a place where beauty and difficulty exist side by side, each shaping the other in ways that are not always easy to see. You continue walking, and the air begins to shift once more this time, carrying something that feels distant yet persistent, not part of the street itself, but pressing in from beyond it. The sounds of Storyville still surround you. Music drifts from open doors, conversations rise and fall in familiar patterns. Footsteps trace steady paths along the worn ground. And yet beneath it all, there is a faint sense of something watching from the outside, something that does not quite belong here. You slow slightly, because this feeling is different. A firmly grounded historical reality is that Storyville existed under constant scrutiny from reform movements, religious groups, and concerned citizens who saw the district as a moral problem that needed to be addressed. Their voices did not always reach directly into these streets, but they shaped the larger environment that surrounded it. You begin to sense that influence now, not as a noun or sound, but as a pressure. A group stands near a corner, their conversation quieter than those you passed earlier. One of them speaks in a tone that carries concern rather than ease. The others listen, their expressions thoughtful, their posture more contained. You do not hear the details, but the mood is clear. You continue walking, and as you do, you notice small changes in behaviour. A glance that lingers just a moment longer. A conversation that pauses when someone passes by. A door that closes more carefully than before. These are not dramatic shifts, but they add up. A lesser-known but revealing detail is that many reformers distributed pamphlets and held meetings in parts of the city beyond Storyville, urging its closure and warning of its perceived dangers. While these efforts were not always visible within the district itself, their influence gradually shaped public opinion and policy. You imagine those voices, not here in this moment, but somewhere nearby, speaking, writing, gathering, forming a narrative about this place that exists separately from the lives unfolding within it. You take a breath, and the air feels slightly cooler again, touched by that sense of distance, as if the night carries not only what is present, but also what is said about it elsewhere. You pass a doorway where two figures stand close together, their conversation low, their expression serious. One gestures briefly, then lowers their hand as if reconsidering something they were about to say. You move on, and the street begins to feel more watchful, not in an immediate sense, but in a broader way, as if the district is aware of being observed even when the observers are not physically present. Some historians have examined how these external pressures contributed to the eventual closure of Storyville. One interpretation suggests that moral reform movements played a significant role in shaping the decision. Another perspective points to a combination of factors including political, social, and economic influences all converging over time. As you walk, you can feel that convergence beginning to take shape. Not fully formed, but present. A woman passes by you, her step steady, her gaze forward. There is no visible hesitation in her movement. Yet there is a subtle awareness in the way she carries herself, as if attuned to shifts that are not immediately visible. You notice it, even if you cannot fully define it. The music continues, but it feels slightly different now. Not quieter, not slower, but more contained, as if the space it occupies has narrowed just a little. Conversations follow a similar pattern, their edges softer, their tone more measured. You step beneath a lamp, its light steady and warm. For a moment, everything feels unchanged. Then you step beyond it, and the awareness returns. You pass a small group gathered near a building, their voices low, their posture close. One of them glances briefly toward the street, then back to the others, as if checking something before continuing. You move on, and the street opens slightly ahead, the lamp stretching out in a familiar line marking the path forward. The movement resumes its steady flow, the sounds blending into the rhythm you have come to recognize. Yet the feeling remains, a quiet tension, a sense that this place, for all its established patterns, exists within a larger conversation that is not entirely under its control. You take another breath, and the air carries that duality with it. The warmth of the night, the familiarity of the sounds, and beneath it the faint presence of something shifting beyond the edges. You begin to understand that Storyville is not isolated. It is connected to the city, to the people who speak about it, to the forces that shape what it is allowed to be. You continue walking, and as you do, the street settles back into its rhythm, the music drifting once more, the voices gathering, the movement flowing. But now you carry a deeper awareness, that what you're seeing is only part of the story, and that beyond these streets, decisions are forming. Opinions are growing and changes are beginning to take shape slowly, quietly, but inevitably. You move onward, and the mood lifts in a subtle, almost playful way. Not brighter exactly, but lighter. The street ahead carries a different kind of energy, one shaped by curiosity rather than routine. You begin to notice people who move with a slightly different rhythm, pausing more often, looking around with open interest rather than practiced awareness. They do not quite belong here, not in the way others do, and yet they are a part of the scene all the same. A widely acknowledged aspect of Storyville is that it attracted visitors from beyond New Orleans who came not only for experience but for the story of the place itself. Travellers arrived with expectations shaped by rumour, by guidebooks, by whispered accounts that turned the district into something larger than reality. You begin to see that influence now. A pair walks ahead of you, their steps slow, their attention shifting from one building to the next. One gestures toward a doorway, speaking in a tone that suggests fascination. The other listens, nodding, their gaze lingering just a moment longer than those who know this place well. You follow them at a distance, not closely, just enough to observe. They pause beneath a lamp, pulling out a small booklet. You cannot read it clearly, but you recognize the shape, the careful handling, the way it guides their attention. They compare something on the page to what stands before them as if matching expectation to reality. Then they move on. A lesser known but intriguing detail is how exaggerated stories about Storyville often circulated far beyond the city, shaping how outsiders imagined it. Tales grew in the telling, blending truth with embellishment, until the district took on an almost mythical quality in the minds of those who had never set foot here. You begin to sense that gap between what is imagined and what is real. A man passes you, speaking animatedly to a companion, his voice carrying fragments of a story that feels larger than life. He gestures broadly, describing something you cannot fully hear, his expression bright with enthusiasm. You wonder how much of what he says is true, and how much has been shaped by the telling. You continue walking, and the street seems to respond to this presence of curiosity. The sounds feel slightly more pronounced, as if the environment itself is aware of being observed. The music carries a touch more flourish. The conversations hold a hint of performance. It is not forced, but it is noticeable. Some historians have reflected on how Storyville's reputation grew through a mix of direct experience and second-hand storytelling. One interpretation suggests that these narratives amplified certain aspects while minimizing others, creating a version of the district that was easier to share and remember. Another view emphasizes that even exaggerated releases often contained elements of truth, shaped into forms that captured attention. As you walk, you can feel both layers, the reality around you and the story being told about it. You pass a doorway where a small group stands, their posture relaxed, their attention divided between the street and their own conversation. One of them glances toward a passing pair of visitors, their expression shifting slightly as if recognizing the difference between those who know and those who are still discovering. It is a quiet distinction, but it carries meaning. You move on, and the street curves, gently revealing another stretch of buildings, each one lit in that familiar warm glow. The movement continues steady and layered, yet now you notice how often people pause to look, to take in details, to form impressions that they will carry with them beyond this place. A woman stands near a window, speaking softly to someone beside her. Her tone carries a hint of amusement, as if responding to a question she has heard many times before. She gestures lightly toward the street, her explanation brief but sufficient. You do not hear the words, but you understand the exchange, a curiosity met with a practice. You take a breath, and the air feels lighter here, touched by that sense of discovery. It carries the same familiar scents, but they seem less dense, more open, as if shaped by the movement of those who pass through without staying long. You continue walking, and as you do, you begin to notice how stories form in real time. A glance becomes a memory, a sound becomes a detail, a moment becomes something that will be described later, shaped into a narrative that may grow or change with each retelling. You realize that Storyville exists in two ways, as a place and as an idea. A place you are walking through now with all its layers, its rhythms, its quiet realities, and an idea that travels beyond it, carried by those who come and go, shaped by what they choose to remember. You pass beneath another lamp, its light steady, its glow soft against the night. For a moment, everything feels balanced, the reality and the story, and as you step forward again, you carry both with you, aware that what you are seeing will not remain unchanged once it leaves this street. It will be told, retold, and transformed, just as this place has been time and again. You move forward and the night feels steady for a few more steps. Then something changes. It is not in the music, which still drifts through the air with its familiar warmth. It is not in the movement of people, which continues in quiet patterns you have come to recognize. It is something less visible, something that sits just beneath the surface, like a shift in the current that you feel before you fully understand it. You slow slightly, because this feels different from anything before. A firmly grounded historical development is that the approach of the First World War brought increased scrutiny to places like Storyville, especially from military authorities concerned about the behavior and health of soldiers stationed nearby. Their influence began to shape decisions in ways that reached directly into the life of the district. You take a breath, and the air feels tighter, not closed, but held. A group stands near the edge of the street, their conversation low, their posture closer than before. One of them speaks with quiet intensity, their words measured, as if discussing something that carries weight beyond the moment. The others listen, their expressions serious, their attention fixed. You pass by slowly, and though you do not hear the details, the tone remains with you. You continue walking, and the street begins to feel more contained. The music still plays, but it no longer stretches as freely into the night. Conversations are quieter, more focused. Even the laughter you hear feels shorter, as if held back by something unspoken. A lesser known but revealing detail is that military pressure in New Orleans led to growing concern about maintaining discipline among troops, particularly in areas close to the district. This concern was not only about behavior, but also about reputation and control factors that would soon carry significant consequences. You begin to sense that pressure now, not as a direct force, but as a presence that shapes how people move, how they speak, how they carry themselves. A carriage passes by slower than those you have seen earlier. The driver's posture is upright, his attention fixed ahead. There is a stillness to his movement, a focus that feels deliberate. You watch him go, and for a moment the street feels quieter in his wake. Some historians have explored whether the closure of Storyville was driven primarily by wartime concerns or by long-standing social pressures that had been building for years. One interpretation suggests that the war provided the final push, bringing urgency to decisions that had been delayed. Another perspective points to a broader shift in attitudes, with multiple influences converging at the same moment. As you walk, you can feel that convergence, not as a single event, but as a gradual tightening. You pass a doorway where the curtain remains still, the light inside dimmer than before. There is no movement visible, no sound escaping into the street. It feels like a pause, though you cannot tell how long it has lasted. You move on, and the street opens slightly, the lamps casting their familiar glow, yet the atmosphere does not fully return to what it was. There is a quiet awareness in the way people move, a sense that something is changing, even if it has not yet taken shape. A woman stands near a window, her posture composed, her gaze directed outward. She does not move as you pass, but there is a stillness in her presence that feels different from before, not relaxed, attentive. You continue walking, and the music shifts again softer, now more contained, as if adjusting to the mood around it. The notes stretch out, leaving more space between them. The rhythm slows, not dramatically, but enough to be felt. You take another breath, and the air carries that shift with it. The warmth remains, but it feels thinner, as if something is beginning to move away. You pass a small group gathered. Near a corner, their conversation low, their expressions thoughtful. One of them glances toward the street, then back to the others, as if measuring what can be said openly and what should remain unspoken. You do not linger, but you notice. You continue forward. And the district feels different now, not in its appearance, but in its tone. The layers you have moved through remain, but they are touched by this new presence, this sense of something approaching from beyond the edges. You begin to understand that change does not arrive all at once. It gathers, it builds, it moves through spaces quietly before it becomes visible. A man passes you, his step steady, his gaze forward. There is no sign of hesitation in his movement. Yet there is a focus that feels sharper than before, as if he's aware of something that has not yet been fully spoken. You watch him go, and then you move on. The street stretches ahead, familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. The lamps glow, the music plays, the people move, yet beneath it all something has shifted. You carry that awareness with you, because now you know that this place, for all its rhythm and routine, exists within a moment that is beginning to change. And as you walk deeper into the night, you do so with a quieter step, aware that what you're seeing may not remain as it is for much longer. You continue forward and the night feels suspended. Not silent, not empty, but held in a kind of quiet pause that you cannot quite explain. The street still carries its familiar glow. Lamps burn, steadily casting warm light across the worn ground. The buildings stand as they have all evening, their windows lit, their doors opening and closing in gentle rhythm. And yet beneath all of it, something feels different. Final. You slow your steps, because this feeling asks for it. A widely accepted historical fact is that Storyville was officially closed in 1917, following mounting pressure from federal authorities, particularly the United States Navy, which sought to eliminate such districts near military bases during wartime. The decision came not as a sudden surprise, but as the culmination of forces that had been building for years. You take a breath, and the air feels thinner now. Not cooler, just quieter. You pass a doorway where the light inside flickers slightly as if uncertain. A figure stands within their posture, still, their attention turned inward rather than toward the street. There is no movement to greet anyone passing by, no gesture to invite, just presence. You move on, and the street begins to feel less like a flow and more like a series of moments, each one separate, each one carrying its own weight. A lesser known but telling detail is how uneven the closing process was. Some houses shut their doors quickly, responding to orders without delay. Others lingered, holding on to routine for as long as possible, continuing their patterns, even as the certainty of change settled around them. You begin to see that unevenness now. One building stands dark, its windows empty, its door closed tight. Just a few steps away, another remains lit, voices still drifting faintly from within as if the night continues without interruption. The contrast is quiet, but unmistakable. You continue walking, and the sounds of the district begin to thin. The music, once constant, now comes in fragments. A few notes from one direction, then silence. A faint rhythm from another, then stillness again. It feels like something fading, not all at once, but gradually. Some historians continue to debate whether the closure of Storyville marked a clear end or simply a transformation. One perspective suggests that while the district itself was dissolved, the activities it contained did not disappear, but moved into other parts of the city. Another view emphasizes the symbolic nature of the closure, seeing it as a moment when public policy and social pressure reshaped the visible landscape. As you walk, you can sense both ideas, the ending and the continuation beneath it. You pass a small group gathered near a corner. Their voices low, their expression subdued. One of them speaks softly, the others listening without interruption. There is no laughter here, no lightness. Only a quiet exchange that feels heavier than the conversations you heard earlier in the night. You do not linger, but you feel the shift. You take another step, and the ground beneath your feet feels different now, though nothing visible has changed. It is as if the weight of movement has lessened, leaving behind a stillness that settles into the space. A woman stands near a doorway, her posture composed, her gaze directed outward. She does not move as you pass, but there is a sense of waiting in the way she holds herself, as if listening for something that may or may not come. You continue on, and the street stretches ahead, its familiar line of lamps, now marking a quieter path. The flow of people has slowed. Fewer figures pass by. Those who do move with a kind of quiet purpose, their steps steady, their attention focused. The night is not over, but it feels different. You pass another building, its door slightly open, the light inside dimmer than before. A figure moves within their motion, slow, deliberate, as if carrying out a final task. Then the door closes gently and the light disappears. You stand for a moment, not stopping fully, just noticing, because this feels like a closing not only of doors but of something larger, a pattern, a rhythm, a way of life that has held together for years. You take a breath and the air feels still. The music has almost faded now, leaving behind only the faintest traces. Voices are softer, more distant. Even the movement of the street feels reduced, as if the space itself is settling. You begin to understand that endings do not always arrive with noise. Sometimes they come quietly, step by step, door by door, light by light. You continue walking, and as you do, the district feels less like a place in motion and more like a memory forming in real time. The details remain, but they feel less anchored, as if they are beginning to loosen from the present. A carriage passes slowly behind you, its sound soft, almost distant. You do not turn to look. You let it pass, its presence fading into the quiet that follows. You take another step, and the street ahead opens into a softer glow, the lamp still burning, but the space between them wider, the shadows deeper. You carry on, aware now that you are moving through something that is coming to an end, even if the final moment has not yet fully arrived. And as the night settles into this quieter state, you continue forward gently, steadily, holding the fading rhythm of Storyville as it slips into silence. You continue walking, and the quiet settles in more fully now. Not empty, but softened. The street no longer feels like a place in motion. It feels like something that is being remembered even as you move through it. The lamps still glow, though their light seems gentler. The buildings remain, yet their presence feels less immediate, as if they are beginning to drift into something less solid. You slow your pace, because there is no longer any urgency to move forward. A broadly recognized historical truth is that although Storyville closed in 1917, its influence did not vanish with it. The musicians who played here carried their sound into other cities, shaping what would become a defining musical tradition. The stories of the district continued to circulate, growing and changing with each retelling. You take a breath, and the air feels lighter, not because anything has disappeared, but because the weight of the night has begun to lift. You pass a building that once held light and movement, now quiet, its windows dim. There is no sign of activity, yet it does not feel abandoned. It feels paused, as if holding on to what it was for just a little longer. You continue on, and the sounds that remain are softer now, a distant note of music, faint and stretched thin, a quiet voice speaking somewhere out of sight, the gentle rhythm of your own steps on the worn ground. It creates a different kind of presence, one shaped by memory. A lesser known but intriguing detail is how much of Storyville's legacy was preserved through early recordings and personal accounts. Musicians who once played in these streets would later record their music elsewhere, carrying fragments of this place into new environments, allowing its influence to extend far beyond its physical boundaries. You begin to sense that continuation now, not in what you see, but in what lingers. You pass beneath a lamp, and its light feels softer than before, as if filtered through something unseen. The shadows it casts stretch longer, blending more easily into the spaces between buildings. You pause for a moment, not stopping. Fully, just allowing the stillness to settle around you. Some historians have reflected on how Storyville has been remembered, over time often shaped as much by nostalgia as by fact. One interpretation suggests that the district has been romanticized, its complexities softened into a more palatable narrative. Another view emphasizes the importance of remembering its realities alongside its cultural contributions, holding both aspects in balance. As you stand there, you can feel that duality, the beauty that lingers and the weight that remains. You begin walking again, and the street opens slightly, revealing a longer stretch of quiet. The lamps continue their steady line, but the space between them feels wider now, as if the night itself is expanding. A figure passes you, their steps slow, their presence almost indistinct. You do not look closely, and they do not look at you. The moment is brief, passing without interruption. You continue on, and the air carries a faint trace of something familiar. The warmth you felt earlier, the layered sense, the quiet energy of movement. It is all still there, but softened as if viewed from a distance. You realize that this is how places remain, not as they were, but as they are remembered. You pass a doorway, its frame dark, its interior no longer visible. There is no curtain, no light, no movement. Yet you can almost imagine what once existed there. The sound of music, the murmur of voices, the quiet routines that filled the space night after night. You do not need to see it, because you have already felt it. You take another breath, and the air feels calm. The tension that once moved through the district has eased. The urgency has faded. What remains is something quieter, more reflective. You continue walking, and as you do, the sense of Storyville as a living place begins to shift into something else. Not gone, not erased, but transformed into memory, into influence, into something that exists beyond the boundaries of these streets. The music you heard earlier returns faintly, carried from somewhere far beyond your reach. It is softer now, less defined, but still present, like an echo that refuses to disappear completely. You listen, and for a moment it feels as though the past and present have blended together, creating a space that is neither one nor the other. You step forward, and the street begins to fade into the distance behind you, not in a physical sense, but in the way your attention moves forward, leaving the details to settle into something quieter. You carry them with you, the light, the sound, the movement, all of it becoming part of something that continues even after the place itself has changed. And as you move toward the edge of this memory, you understand that Storyville has not truly vanished. It has simply shifted into music, into stories, into the quiet spaces where the past lingers just long enough to be felt even when it can no longer be seen. You continue walking, and the street feels different now in a way that is almost difficult to describe. Not quieter, not louder, just farther away, as if you are no longer inside it in the same way you were before. The lamps still burn, but their glow feels softer, less anchored to the ground. The buildings still stand, but their edges blur slightly, blending into the night, as though they are no longer insisting on being seen so clearly. Even the air feels less dense, carrying only traces of what once filled it so completely. You slow your steps without thinking, because there is nowhere in particular to reach anymore. A widely recognized historical outcome is that after the closure of Storyville, New Orleans did not lose the culture that had formed there. Instead, it dispersed. Musicians moved into clubs, dance halls, and riverboats, carrying with them rhythms and styles that would help shape the early development of jazz as it spread beyond the district's original boundaries. You take a breath, and the air feels open, not empty, just no longer crowded with presence. You pass a final cluster of buildings, their windows dim, their doors closed. There is no movement inside, or at least none that reaches the street anymore. Yet you do not feel like you are looking at something abandoned. It feels more like something resting after a long stretch of activity. You continue forward, and the sounds are now faint, almost entirely absorbed by distance. A soft echo of music that might be real, or might already belong to memory. A distant step, a whisper of movement that fades before it becomes clear. You begin to understand that you are no longer moving deeper into Storyville. You are moving out of it. A lesser known but meaningful detail is that many early accounts of Storyville were written long after its closure, meaning much of what survives today is shaped by recollection, interpretation, and the passage of time. In that way, the district exists not only as a place that once stood in New Orleans, but also as a layered memory constructed through voices that came later. You can feel that now, as if the street is becoming less a physical space and more a collection of impressions. You walk beneath one of the last lamps, its light stretching across the ground in a long, quiet shape. There are no crowds here anymore, no overlapping conversations, no steady rhythm of movement, just space and the gentle continuation of your steps. You pause for a moment, not because you need to, but because it feels appropriate. Some historians have continued to reflect on Storyville not as a fixed point in time, but as a lens through which broader questions about urban life regulation, culture, and memory can be understood. One perspective suggests it represents the tension between control and freedom in rapidly changing cities. Another view emphasizes how its legacy lives on more through interpretation than through physical remnants. As you stand there, both ideas feel present: the place it once was, and the story it has become. You take one final look down the street, and what remains is no longer the same vivid layering of sound, light, and movement. Instead, it feels like an outline, a softened impression of everything you have walked through. You begin to move again, slowly, gently, leaving the district behind, and with each step the details fade a little more, not disappearing entirely but settling into something quieter within you. A memory of music that once filled narrow streets, a sense of movement that once shaped the night, a feeling of layers, voices, and lives that briefly converged in a single place. And as you step beyond the final stretch of light, Storyville remains behind you no longer, as a street you walk through, but as a presence that lingers in thought, shaped by everything you have seen and everything that has now begun to drift into silence. The night finally softens, and you are left with stillness. Sweet dreams!